Hey race fans, welcome into another episode of Backseat Drivers. I'm Alex Weaver and I'm going to be joined by Kim Coon and Jonathan Merriman. Guys, we have talked about Harvick versus Hamlin so many times this year. If I had $1 for every time we said it, we'd all be sitting on some tropical vacation right now and not having to worry about work. But they sweep the weekend in the doubleheader. It's pretty wild that the two best cars in the field right now take Saturday and Sunday's show.
Punch, counter punch. That's what we're seeing week in and week out. It's a heavyweight title fight. And, it's funny to think that, they're going to be 16 more guys in the ring with them throughout the next 10 races after we get out of Daytona. But unless somebody does something that they haven't been able to do, I don't see anybody going to beat these two guys. It's going to be them all the way down to Phoenix. But it's unbelievable how much they're the class of the field and how confident those two guys are and their crew chiefs. They show up they expect to run 1-2 every week.
They're definitely in a different playing field than the rest of the teams. I mean, each of them has at least double the wins the next highest driver has, which is Keselowski with 3. So it's crazy. Denny obviously 6 wins, Harvick 7. I don't think anything stops them. Maybe you have 1 or 2 cars that can play some sort of catch-up before the end of the season, because obviously we have 4 spots in the championship 4, but I think it'd be hard to bet against either of the two of them. I would like to remind Merriman, though, that a few weeks ago he was a little worried about Denny. Granted, it's been 3 or 4 weeks since he said that, but there was a point where Merriman was concerned about Denny Hamlin.
Here's why I'm not concerned about Denny anymore. I'm very concerned about Denny on 1.5 miles, but he has enough bonus points and there's enough variety of racetrack as we get throughout this stretch that I think he will be fine. And once we get to Phoenix, it's going to be hard to beat Harvick there. I know as of late, it's just not his place, but I'm worried about Denny at the 1.5 miles, so I don't think you have to worry about him through the playoffs.
Denny is fine. He's fine. No, like you mentioned that when you say like Kyle Busch is fine or Clint Boyer right now is fine. Denny Hamlin is not fine. We might as well paint him a map to victory lane at Phoenix.
Denny's been, by the way, you kind of were hesitant about Denny at Phoenix. I know Harvick is in a different league when we get to Phoenix, but Denny recently at Phoenix has been fine. Is not even the word to use. He's been good.
Not in the fall.
Yeah. Merriman, when your wife asks how she looks before you guys go out to dinner, don't say fine. Okay, so we do know that the last couple of weeks, when you're not talking about Harvick and Hamlin, however, you're talking about the bubble and those last 4 guys to make it into the NASCAR playoffs. 3 names that we're looking at right now for Daytona. And, Daytona's a wild card. So who in the world knows what's going to happen there? But we're looking at William Byron, Jimmy Johnson, and Matt DiBenedetto. Guys, I have 1 week for my championship pick to make it into the playoffs. So I don't think Jimmy Johnson is fine.
Yeah, Jimmy should be a little concerned. Although when we were headed into Dover, he was a few points to the good. We leave Dover. He's a few points out. He and his teammate William Byron have kind of been playing hopscotch along that line. But if we're looking at DiBenedetto, Jimmy, and William, I think DiBenedetto is going to fare the best at Daytona. Granted, he doesn't have the finishes that he should, but he's always fast. He's always at the front of the field. I think he's going to have some good luck on his side for some reason this coming weekend. I think Jimmy gets in by a hair. I think Williams out.
There's a chance both of them might not get in. You got Ricky Stenhouse Jr. sitting back there who has won at Daytona in the summer. You've got Eric Jones who's won at Daytona in the summer. There are some – I don't think those guys are necessarily wild cards. They're a little bit of a dark horse just because of the performance as of late. But then again, it's Daytona. Anything can happen here. But to Kim's point, William Byron is not the best here. Jimmy Johnson is okay, but what have we been saying about Jimmy all year? He's got to stay out of his own way at this racetrack. I don't know how you play stage points for this race because it could come down to a stage. But do you want to be aggressive during stage 1 and stage 2, or do you want to lay back? I mean, go back to the Roval 2 years ago with Truex and Jimmy effectively took himself out of moving on to the next round of the playoffs because he was being so aggressive. Is that in the back of his head? Does he go out there and try to play calm, and does that make him miss? Who knows? There's so much going on through these guys' heads, and there's so many scenarios that can play themselves out. If I'm a crew chief, if I'm a driver, I'm sick to my stomach if I'm anywhere other than locked into the playoffs this weekend.
Well, Merriman, we talked about it on the preview show as well about manufacturers working together and how big that's become at super speedways. So do you look at your 9 and your 88 teammate who are locked in and say, hey, we got 2 out here, help us out? And then Matty D working with the Fords is not a bad time to work for them either. So, Kim, what camp fares? You going with the Fords? You going with the Chevys? Who are you picking?
Oh, man. I probably am going to go with the Fords. However, Merriman did have a good point. It really could be anyone when you get to Daytona. We see so many different faces at the front of the field. I'm not going to count out Ricky Stenhouse Jr. He's great when we go to super speedways. I'll even throw in like a Matt Kenseth. Granted, he hasn't been fast this year with CGR, but CGR always has cars at the front of the field when we go to super speedway, specifically Daytona. We've seen how well Kurt has run there with them, and Matt's a multi-time winner at Daytona.
Kenseth is the biggest stick in the proverbial spokes of anybody, I think, now that Kim mentions it. I had a radio interview the other week, and don't count him out because he's really, really good. The Chevys are really, really fast, and, you know, Chip Ganassi Racing's got pretty good super speedway equipment. So, good point.
All right, here on Backseat Drivers, we're going to welcome in 2 more drivers to the backseat with Danny and Eric. Guys, we can talk about this bubble talk for the playoffs for days to come now, and I'm sure that everybody's going to be because Daytona is such a wild card when it comes to who's going to get in the NASCAR playoffs. But we know that the talk of the town for the super speedways is working together as a team and working together with manufacturers. So let me throw it on you guys. The 9 and the 88 have to be focused on getting the 48 and the 24 into the playoffs.
Yeah, I think that's an advantage for William Byron and Jimmy Johnson because that's, I think, where all of Team Hendrick's focus and energy has to be. They're trying to get both those cars in the playoffs, but I do think it's going to be difficult because while, they do have 2 teammates that I think are going to be solely dedicated to helping them out, there's a lot of Fords out there as well, a lot of very fast Fords. And I know they're going after Matt DiBenedetto, and he's not a official Penske car, but he's a Penske light car, and he's going to have 3 Penske cars that if you look at, Ryan Blaney's won 2 of the last 3 super speedway races and almost won the 500 this year. The Penske cars are going to be fast. So the Hendrick cars are really going to have to be all in on this. They're going to have to sit down with Bowman, sit down with Elliott, obviously Byron and Johnson. They're really going to have to nail that point home that they need to work together as a team on Saturday night. William Byron in his post-race at Dover seemed optimistic that they could get both him and Johnson. He's not really looking at beating Jimmy Johnson for 16th. He's looking at beating DiBenedetto and Johnson beating DiBenedetto as well for 15th and 16th. So it sounds like they already kind of have that team element planted sort of in their minds, but they're really going to have to stick to it. And when things get crazy at Daytona, when you get 3 and 4 wide and it's mayhem at the end of that race, it's very difficult to stick to some of those plans without getting frustrated with each other. But I think this is the advantage of having 3 younger drivers who maybe don't feel as comfortable stepping out of line and doing things their own way. Of course, you got 7-time champion Jimmy Johnson. You don't want to make that guy angry. So there might be that might actually end up being an advantage for Hendrick Motorsports.
Yeah, Hendrick Motorsports has to be focusing on the 24 and the 48 this weekend. Specifically, you need the 48 to be out front. As they come into it right now, William Byron is good by 4 points over Jimmy Johnson. Jimmy Johnson's out of the playoffs. Matt DiBenedetto has that spot that both of them need. Matt DiBenedetto comes in just 9 points ahead. They need William Byron to be second place and Jimmy Johnson to be first, and they need to kind of hope for a little bit of bad luck with Matt DiBenedetto.
All right, I'm going to disagree with you guys here. I think that the 5 extra bonus points you get and can carry over with you every single week until you get to Phoenix probably outweighs being the kind of hero and the feel-good story of Jimmy Johnson making the playoffs. I think William Byron is way too optimistic in that front because of like what you guys said, But how does the manufacturer come into this at the end? Because let's put it this way. Ford has a lot of cars also outside. You've got Chris Buescher and Ryan Newman racing for Roush, who, that could making the playoffs for that organization could completely turn that around. So I think team orders are out of the window this weekend between manufacturers. Now, for teams, Rick Hendrick, I think, has got a lot more pull in what Chase Elliott and Alex Bowman do on the racetrack than maybe Chevy saying, hey, let's make sure we push a Chevy to the win. Well, Rick Hendrick wants another car in the playoffs, and RCR wants another car in the playoffs, and we can go down the list. And look, I'm not so sure that we don't see the Toyotas play the same game with Bell and with Jones. With their limited 5 teams in the Cup Series. So I don't know. It's going to be a wild weekend. I think once it's the last lap, it's the last lap. All bets are off. And if you can win at Daytona, you're not going to give that to anybody on account of anything.
I think you're exactly right.
To what you said there, Jonathan, theoretically, both Jimmy Johnson and William Byron could both not make the playoffs. So you say Rick Hendrick wants to have another car in there. He wants to have all 4 of his cars in there. He could. Possibly he could only have the 2 that are locked in right now. Say a Ricky Stenhouse Jr. He's very good on these super speedways. Say he goes out and gets the win on Saturday. Well, that moves him up then into 11th, pushes everybody back down a spot. And if William Byron and Jimmy Johnson don't do good enough to get one of them ahead of Matt DiBenedetto stays in 16th. Both of those 2 then don't make it.
Talking about working together as a team again, like you said, I think you're right. I think once we get to that last lap, that last restart, it is going to be difficult to work together as a team. But I think up to that point, it's all about protecting each other. The last thing you want is for William Byron to get taken out on lap 10 in some sort of big wreck. So you'd hope that the Chevys, the Hendrick cars especially, can work together because the Penske cars are always really good at working together. So they're going to protect Matt DiBenedetto for the first 90% of the race. The Joe Gibbs cars, sometimes they're not as good at working together as other times, but there's only 5 Toyotas out there that are really competitive. 6, I guess, if you include Suarez, they're going to work together and they're going to stick together like a tight-knit little family there. But you're right. When it gets down to that final lap, they're coming out of turn 4. All bets really are off because there are so many, different superpower teams on that cut line. We talked about Wood Brothers / Penske. Hendrick, Gibbs is out. They have a car out trying to get in. It's going to be chaos. I think it's all about protecting yourselves so you can at least get to the finish and have a chance at the win. And then at that point, you just kind of got to go with, as we've seen the last couple of years, you just got to go with whatever line's moving at the very end there.
I think stage points will decide who's in and who's out. That's where this setting the field is going to be determined by stage points, I think.
Be careful not to go so crazy at the end of stage 1 and stage 2. That Daytona is all about making sure that your car is still on the track come that final stage and that final lap there. But we can keep this one short and sweet, guys. But if you had to pick one driver who is not in the playoffs right now to win at Daytona and possibly, you talk about adding craziness. You have a guy who hasn't won yet and who is not locked in, like a Ricky Stenhouse, like a Tyler Reddick, like a Christopher Bell. Who of those guys do you think can make it into victory lane at Daytona and just cause complete, utter craziness for the playoff picture?
I'll take the dart without feathers, Ricky Stenhouse, every time. That boy is wild.
If you're taking Stenhouse, I'll go with my guy. I'll go with Matt Kenseth, 2-time winner at Daytona historically. We'll see what he can do in a Chevy this time.
I'll go with Tyler Reddick. This would be a good opportunity for him to get out front and get both of the RCR cars back in the playoffs this year.
All right, well, we are in store for an epic showdown Saturday night, no doubt, under the lights at Daytona International Speedway. That's coming up on NBC at 7:30 Saturday night. You don't want to miss it, and welcome to the NASCAR playoffs after Daytona.